Lisanne Froon and Kris Kremers, two Dutch students, went on a hike in Panama on April 1st, 2014, with just a bottle of water, a backpack, and a dog. The dog returned, but the women did not. A severed foot, bleached bones, and scattered remains were discovered during a search, but investigators were unable to determine how the women died. What happened to Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon? Both Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon attended university in Amersfoort, the Netherlands at the same time, and were close friends, classmates, and roommates. Lisanne Froon was an optimistic, intelligent, and passionate young woman. She was an avid volleyball player and loved the outdoor life. Kris Kremers was 21 and was described as a creative, reliable, and responsible girl. In addition to living together, they worked together at the same restaurant. Lisanne had graduated with a degree in applied sciences from Deventer, while Kris had just finished her studies in cultural and social education with a specialization in art education. The vacation started on March 15, 2014. They originally had planned to help out some local communities, work as volunteers with youngsters, pick up some Spanish, and take some time for relaxation. However, a misunderstanding caused them to arrive in Bouquet too early for their program, which Kris described as being rude and not at all friendly in an entry in her diary. As a result, the girls' destinies ended up being cloaked in mystery and sorrow, rather than the life-altering journey that they had dreamed of having. Of course, not knowing this, the girls changed their plans, and over the first couple of weeks, the girls had a great time seeing the city on foot, trying out new cuisine, and engaging in other activities typical of tourists. They also became friends with two Dutch boys who were also on vacation, and they spent their time together at restaurants and on beaches, enjoying each other's company. After the first 2 weeks, the girls moved in with a local family who would be their hosts for the subsequent 4 weeks while volunteering at a neighboring school. During this time, the girls would be working as tutors at the school. On April 2nd, 2014, the women hired a guide to show them about Bouquet so they could see as much as possible. They opted to explore the area surrounding the active Bar volcano and the Continental Divide the day before the guided tour. According to a geographical expert, the 3-mile section is reasonably easy to explore, and most missing tourists either return on their own or come across search parties hunting for them. On April 1st, 2014, at about 11 a.m., Kremers and Froon went off in the forest along the Pianista Trail, with only a backpack between them. Azul, the dog of the family they were staying with, followed along with them. It was the last time the women were seen alive, with the exception of seeking instructions from a nearby innkeeper, who suggested they take a taxi back to town and wait for a guide. However, they persevered onto the trail. The hike usually takes about 4 hours to complete. When the dog, Blue, returned home alone, people began to think something had happened to the girls. On April 2nd, 2014, the couple failed to show up for their tour guide appointment, and the police were alerted about the missing girls. When neither Froon nor Kremers' families received a regular check-in call, they were anxious. Authorities began an aircraft search of the trees and a foot search of Bouquet on April 3rd, 2014. Authorities undertook foot and helicopter searches in the days following the students' disappearances. By April 6, 2014, both women's parents had become worried and had flown to Panama with Dutch detectives. The families and investigators began a big search once they arrived. Many people believed Froon and the Kremers were never lost on the mountain and were instead victims of a crime in town. However, this was eventually proven wrong. Using on-foot search teams and dog units, the search moved into the forest where the young women walked. Teams examined for 10 days, then scaled back their search on April 14, 2014, though it lasted for another 10 weeks. In the early days of the police investigations into Kris and Lisanne's disappearance, a German tourist named Marcus reported to a local forest ranger at a control station that he witnessed the two women being beaten and thrown over a ravine. Marcus had arrived in Bouquet on April 4th and had said that the incident occurred on April 5th at Cerro Punta on the Quezcal Trail. He claimed to have heard a female voice yelling for aid, followed by a loud crash. He then claimed to have seen two males crouching and hidden in the bushes, and he fled in terror. Scene Front went to the location in the evening to look for the women, but they were unsuccessful aside from his own plastic water bottle. 2 months after the girls went missing, a woman from the Nagabi tribe in the area turned in a blue bag she claimed that she had discovered by the bank of a nearby river. Sunglasses, a camera, 2 cell phones, money, 2 bras, Froon's passport, and a water bottle were all in the backpack. Authorities had a lead after discovering the women's phones. Investigators discovered a convoluted and bleak timeline after examining the phones. The phones were functioning for over 10 days after the couple had vanished. Throughout this time, Kremers and Froon continually requested assistance, starting from just hours after they began their hike. The first distress call was made at 4:39 p.m. on April 1st from Kremers' iPhone. April 1st, 4:51 p.m., a second attempt was made to reach authorities. 112, the Panama emergency line, off Froon's phone, which was unsuccessful. April 2nd, 6:14 a.m., an attempt to call 112 was made from Kremers' iPhone. 6:58 a.m., an attempt was made to call 112 from Froon's phone. 10:53 a.m., an attempt was made to call 112 and 911, but neither calls went through. April 3rd, 9:33 a.m., an attempt was made from Kremers' phone to call 911. 1:50 p.m., Froon's phone is turned back on to check for potential signal. 4 p.m., Kremers' phone is turned on to check for a signal. 4:19 p.m., Froon's phone is turned on to check for cell signal. April 4th, 9:33 a.m., Kremers' phone is turned on to check for a signal. 4:42 p.m., Kremers' phone is turned on to check for a signal. Notably, on April 4th, Froon's phone stayed off the entire day. April 5th, 10:50 a.m., Kremers' phone is turned on to check for service. 4:37 p.m., Kremers' phone is turned on to check for a signal. 4:50 a.m., Froon's phone is turned on to check for a signal. 5:56 a.m., Froon's phone is turned on and the battery dies. There was no further activity from this phone. On April 6th, 10:26 a.m., Kremers' phone is turned on to check for a signal, but the PIN was entered incorrectly and is not accessed with the correct passcode again. Does this indicate that Kremer was no longer able to put the PIN in? Had she died at this point? 10:51 a.m., Kremers' phone is checked again, but incorrect passcode is entered again. 11:56 a.m. to 1:05 p.m., the final attempts at entering the correct passcode in Kremers' phone was entered and left for an hour, and then turned off and was not turned back on again. Was this Froon? Or was a third party attempting to gain access to the device? On April 8th, between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., 90 flash photos were taken in the deep jungle, well away from any trail. In one photo, the back of Kremers' head is shown with blood near the temple. Several ideas have been presented as to how and why these images were taken. The random photographs appeared concentrated, as if taken with steady hands, implying that they were taken on purpose. Perhaps the photographs functioned as trail markers, guiding the young women around or back to the rescuers. The pair may have utilized the camera flash as a light source, or to scare away animals due to the darkness. Others claim that neither Froon nor Kremers took the images, and that the women were kidnapped. Is it possible that Lisa Ann took the photos of the rocks and Kremers' body in order to track her movements, to return to Kris's body, or for authorities to locate her body in the future? The girls' camera captured even more potential evidence of what occurred. The camera included more than 100 shots. The first few looked like typical tourist photos, with the women smiling together. The tone of the photographs, though, began to shift. One photo taken around at the time of the emergency calls showed Kremers with a worried expression on her face. Following that, the images were taken on April 8, 2014, between 1 and 4 a.m. These included landscapes of vegetation, canyons, and a bridge, as well as seemingly random objects like a stick with plastic stuck to it. With their camera, a Canon PowerShot was found by Dutch authorities. There was a noticeable missing file, image 0509, which was an empty file, and it's unclear what happened. Even if they snapped a horrible image, the girls had no history of deleting their photos. It's a mystery why image 0509, which could be vital evidence, is missing. It's possible that the camera malfunctioned, but that seems improbable. It's more likely that the photo was removed. It is still possible to recover a photograph that has been erased from a camera. Dutch investigators sought to recover the information, but were unable to do so, implying that the camera was connected to a computer and that the video was erased from the computer rather than the camera itself. The majority of fingers appear to be pointing at Panamanian authorities, who have been accused for a botched initial search in the days following the disappearance. Some speculate that they may have witnessed something they didn't want the rest of the world to witness. It's also plausible that a laptop in the middle of a jungle, an unknown individual, possibly one guilty for the girls' deaths, deleted the file, but not the others on the card for some reason. Froon's parents asked that all of the photographs from the camera not be released to the public. Some photographs purport to show Kremers and Froon in a rough state. The newscasters on a Panama-based TV program mistakenly disclosed several images during the broadcast. This happened again on a Dutch TV program. The second show included a photograph of the back of a person's head, which was thought to be Kremers. Kremers' head appears to be injured, with blood on her hair in the shot. This sparked a debate about how Kremers got hurt on the hike, and how Froon might have used the camera for light or to chronicle Kremers' last known location before calling for aid. If Kremers was in danger, the images could have been used to aid rescuers in locating her, using visual markers. The hunt for the young women resumed when the backpack was discovered, this time in a different location. Authorities conducted an investigation near the community of Alto Romero, along the Rio Cubura, also known as the Serpent River. This was not the track Kremers and Froon had planned on taking, so they either got lost or changed their plans. The search yielded something this time: Kremers' clothing, neatly folded and set on the riverbank. About half a mile upstream from where the local tribal ladies supposedly discovered the backpack, the shorts appeared zipped and folded, positioned above the waterline. Surprisingly, the clothes appeared on the opposite side of the river from where the women had taken all of their photographs. Further searches found uncovered human remains 2 months after Kremers' clothes were discovered. A shoe was discovered under a tree beside the river where the bag was last seen. A sock, a complete human foot, and ankle bones with enough flesh for DNA testing were included. DNA tests matched the foot to Froon by the end of August 2014. More bones and skin fragments were discovered later, totaling 33 skeleton remains. They also discovered skin fragments from Kremers in the woods. The young women were clearly dead, but there was no evidence as to how they died. Their bodies were in bits, and much of it had been lost to the river over time. Damage was not visible on the bones, and some of them appeared bleached. Fragments of Froon's foot were the only other sign of injuries, yet a fractured foot wouldn't have killed her. Authorities did not know how the women died, despite the fact that they were found. Authorities faced a difficult task in determining why and how the women died. They began looking for people of interest and attempting to determine whether the women had any company other than the dog. Froon and Kremers were alone when they inquired for directions, according to the innkeeper they spoke with. No one else was with them at the time. Police later found through a Facebook post that the couple had met with certain people before their trip. On the last day anyone saw the women, Froon and Kremers reported they had breakfast with the 2 Dutch males, according to the Post. By this time, the 2 men in question had recently returned from Panama and were questioned by Dutch police in connection with the 2 missing women. Police confirmed that the males were not suspects. The men told authorities how they had chatted with the girls the day before, when they were last seen, and the police wanted to know what they talked about and if any details could lead to clues in the case. This line of inquiry led nowhere. To this day, the men have not been identified, but images of them were available on the girls' social media from the day before they disappeared. In the girls' disappearance, there were no recovered notes or messages on either phone, and no efforts to call or text their parents or friends. They didn't bother to look up their parents or friends, or even send some messages in hopes that they will eventually get signal, and the messages will go through. Kris and Lisanne used to write in their diaries every day before they vanished. According to one story, Lisanne once missed 3 or 4 days in her diary, which she made care to fill in those days and not miss any others. For them, this must have been a burning need that eventually dissipated. Of course, it's difficult to say how their mind worked if they were lost, because it's hard to believe this is uncharacteristic of the girls, who love to write. If their deaths were really due to them getting lost, why would they not have documented this? Investigators finally reached a decision in March 2015, almost a year after Kremers and Froon arrived in Panama. According to their investigation, the women were most likely involved in an accident along the trail and went lost in the woods. Froon was said to have fallen a long way and died in or near the river. Experts indicated the breaks in her ankle and foot could only happen from a fall from a tremendous height, and her foot would confirm this notion. The images revealed the date on which the woman attempted to notify emergency services, which was most likely after Kremers' injuries. They couldn't find their way back in the dark. Froon died in the forest while attempting to leave, leaving Kremers dead or dying. The remains then disintegrated and were strewn miles away, thanks to the river and rain. So that was it. Authorities had marked the case closed. Some people, though, were skeptical. Many people believe the Panamanian authorities handled the matter badly. The whole incident, according to a writer for the Panamanian newspaper, La Estrella Adela Correte, was a shambles. She stated that there was no documented chain of custody for the retrieved evidence or remains. She further stated that the 30 prints discovered on the backpack were not only unidentifiable, but none of the indigenous people who were engaged in the case had their prints documented. She expressed additional concerns about the electronics examination, stating that the condition of the equipment discovered was inconsistent with the location where it was discovered. The lack of damage to the equipment was unusual, but the police did not look into it, nor did they examine a snapshot that had been removed from the camera. Enrique Arrocha, a lawyer representing the Kremers family, expressed worry about evidence handling. He claimed that no forensic investigation was carried out at the crime scene, and that the evidence and its origins were unknown. The women's skulls and other important bones, which could provide a more definitive cause of death, were also still missing. Conspiracy theories and allegations of police and government cover-ups gained traction as a result of this evidence mismanagement. Some suspect the area's indigenous people killed and cannibalized the women, and are now concealing the crime by turning over evidence and appearing to cooperate. Others speculated that the fatalities were the result of cartels or organ traffickers, which would explain why the bodies were strewn about. While there are many views regarding what transpired, one reoccurring theme is that Panamanian government and authorities kept quiet on purpose. Why would they do something like this? According to certain analysts and others engaged in the case, everything was done in the name of tourism, which brings in a lot of money for Panama. Because portraying Panama as unsafe could hurt tourism, it is more comfortable to infer that these women died in an accident. Were Froon and Kremers murdered? Over 24 additional visitors went missing or were found deceased in this area between 2009 and 2017. In 2017, a re-examination of the case revealed that enough evidence to imply that these disappearances, including those of Froon and Kremers, may be linked to a serial killer. The killer in question being the so-called Hannibal Lecter of Bugaba, who was arrested in March of the same year for chopping up a 27-year-old lady he met on Facebook, and then putting her body on a bonfire on his own property, not far from Bouquet. When authorities apprehended him, he was carrying unidentified, uncooked meat in a bag, earning him the moniker Cannibal. According to press sources, he is still being investigated for any links to other missing people in the area. Of course, the online community has their own thoughts on what happened to these women. An investigation through authorities can revisit the case at any point due to the passage of time. No one can definitively explain what happened to Froon and Kremers in the Panamanian forests. According to a source close to the victims' families in Holland, they are still looking for answers or new clues. The newly discovered police document reveals some new details, such as the allegation that the cause of death was a crime rather than an accident. However, a discussion with the guide could help break new ground in this investigation and provide some closure to bereaved loved ones.